rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. And the Rumble chat, which, of course, contains the majority of my chatters, because that's the way we do things around here, they're all talking about how cold it's getting. And I haven't even, we really, where I'm at, haven't really gotten down to freezing at all this year. I think we've hit freezing, I think maybe once or possibly twice at all, which is odd for us. Just so you know, it's kind of odd. But the whole Pacific Northwest seems to be a little bit warmer than normal for the winter. Now, that being said, forecasts are showing that February is going to be our month for the snow and the cold and that kind of stuff. Here's hoping. Here's hoping. And for those who are in California, they would love to have cooler weather. I'll get to that in just a minute. But tonight, of course, is
down to business.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
It is Whiskey Wednesday. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. And tonight I am drinking, here you go, Bonnie. Bonnie's going to love me for this. Four Roses, single barrel, is what's in the glass tonight. And tonight, although normally it would be the TGRN glass, tonight it is the Trump 2024 glass. That is going to be my glass for a little while. But anyway, that's what's in here, as well as the stones below. As 3 Chevy, it takes stones to drink with whiskey. So let's go ahead and take that sip. First drink, first swallow, first mouthful. Woo. There we go. All right, folks. Tonight we have G. G is on deck for the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are of mind, please stand, remove your hat if you're wearing one, and place your hand over your heart and join in with G in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And, of course, I thank you, G, for that wonderful rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like to hear your rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance played here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself reciting the pledge in your style, whether it is video or audio, doesn't make a difference. Take that file, attach it to an email, and send it off to me. Send it to fans, F-A-N-S, at americanperspective.online. That's fans, F-A-N-S, at americanperspective.online. And I'll get you into the rotation. All right, folks, let's go ahead and talk about the aforementioned TGRN. That's right, TGRN stands for True Grit Roots Network. That's right, True Grit Roots Network. TGRN.net is our home on the web. You can find us there and listen direct from your browser, or you can also download our app. Or if you already have the Live 365, iHeart, or Odyssey, AUDACY apps, you can listen on any of those. You can find us in their catalog of digital radio stations. Let me tell you about one of our wonderful blues shows called Cruisin' on the Blues Highway, put together by Pat Mighty Quinn. Cruisin' on the Blues Highway is exclusively on TGRN, True Grit Roots Network. And Pat says this: I have always been a fan of the blues and blues rock going back to the late 60s. My two older sisters introduced me to several artists and bands like Muddy Waters and Buddy Guy, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, and then in the 1970s I discovered so much more. I learned a lot from the blues greats back then. You'll hear a lot of guitar-driven artists on my show, which a number of listeners have told me how much they appreciate that I feature these types of artists they can't hear or find on other stations. The blues is here to stay, I guarantee that. It airs 6 p.m. Central Time on Thursday, with an encore presentation Saturdays at 4 p.m. Central. So that's Thursday, 6 p.m. for the original, and Saturday at 4 p.m. for the encore presentation. And I just got to tell you, with our programming slight change coming up at the end of this month, or toward the end of this month, you will probably hear more about Pat Mighty Quinn and his style of blues and blues rock on the station. Go and check us out, tgrn.net. That stands for True Grit Roots Network, based out of Austin, Texas. All right. So let's get kicked in here. We were talking about the weather. Well, there is a big thing going on. And realistically, the reason why it's such a big thing is because it's happening around one of the most populous cities in the country. Yes, I am talking about the fires in Los Angeles. Here is a map you can see of the 3 major fires that are going on, and it just sort of rings the city. There's the Eaton fire, way over, well, just up above my head here, right there, Eaton fire. Then there's the Hearst fire, and then there's the Palisades fire. Now, the Palisades fire is where a lot of those celebrity homes, and like I was telling you about with James Woods, his home is in that Palisades fire area, which, by the way, he did post that he does believe that his home did catch fire. His smoke detectors were going off. He has them like wired to his phone, his iPhone. And yeah, they're just yeah. Anyway, now, as far as I am aware, now this was, of course, earlier this morning, in terms of the updates and the pictures that, and stuff that I'm going to show you, but apparently they still do not know what has started these fires. They still have no idea what's going on in terms of how these fires got started. But I can tell you this much. The Democrat, lunatic, leftist morons all jumped on the whole idea of climate change being the problem, especially Senator Bernie Sanders. He's like, you can't tell me this isn't climate change. Well, let me explain something to you. And this coming from a person who has lived in the Pacific Northwest a good majority of his life. Mismanagement of forests, mismanagement of open spaces and areas where you go and, you don't have clearing, you don't put in fire breaks, you don't clear out the underbrush, the dead stuff. All that does is provide fuel for fires. And when states like California, Oregon, and Washington, who all 3 sit there and say that, oh, no, we can't send all of, people in there. We can't clean that stuff out because, that hurts the environment. Well, what hurts the environment more is allowing that stuff to become basically tinder. And no, I'm not talking about the dating app, but basically become Tinder and start fires and burn hotter, faster. And especially in places like California, where you get a whole bunch of wind. Now, also, too, the other piece that seems to be contributing to this entire situation is apparently there was a proposition that was passed called Prop 1 that was designed and specifically set aside money to refill the reservoirs and other water areas because, again, this is California. Southern California is very dry. Okay? it's just the nature of the beast. It's kind of like running off to frickin', Phoenix, Arizona, and thinking, okay, yeah, we're in the middle of the desert. We need to find some water. Well, they ended up Proposition 1 passed. They apparently allocated the money, but not a single drop of water was brought back into the frickin' reservoirs. And so the poor fire department, they're putting their hoses and stuff on these hydrants, and there's no water. The water is coming out. It's just barely trickling out. And all of this is due to the fact that they mismanaged this entire thing. Okay? This has nothing to do with climate change. This has everything to do with how the Democrats have been mismanaging these things. Okay? They did a water study, and they did a water study thing, and they found that there's like something called, I guess, the 3-inch fish or whatever. I don't even know what the hell a 3-inch fish is, but apparently there was fish in the reservoirs that they couldn't fill the water up there. And it's being directed away from California, as Buddy points out. They're now, the planes are actually flying into the Pacific Ocean, those big planes that go and, suck up the water as they fly across the water and everything. They're going and they're sucking up water from the Pacific Ocean to go and pour the water over these fires. The fire department is running out of water. And it's just not the entire situation. Yes, it sucks. I feel bad for all of these people. Okay. I feel so bad for these people. And I'm not even talking like the celebrities, although I do appreciate that. But there's another step on top of all this that's causing a huge problem. The state of California regulated the shit out of the insurance companies. And yes, I did use the S word there, folks, so earmuffs. But they regulated the crap out of the insurance companies. Just like Florida was doing with some of the Florida insurance companies. Well, guess what? California, a lot of the insurance companies left. And so, for an example, like James Woods posted, he doesn't have fire insurance. Because the company that he had for fire insurance left the state of California. California regulated their crap. Okay. They regulated the insurance companies to the point where the insurance companies are like, hey, we're not making any money. So, we're gone. We're out of here. And because of that now, there are many of these homes that are up there that these people have had everything in their lives lost, and it's gone in an instant, and they have no insurance. These are multi-million-dollar homes, and most of them, I'm going to hazard a guess, will probably never get rebuilt because there's no insurance there. I cannot believe this. Now, we're talking about close to 30,000 residents who have left, and I believe I've heard somewhere around 2 to maybe 3 people have died due to this entire situation. But the Santa Ana winds, they get whipped up, and they freaking burn fast because, again, there's no clearing. There's no fire breaks. There's nothing to stop the fire from running. And it's got all of that because of the environmentalists. It's got all of that tinder down below underneath, and it just spreads quickly. Well, here's some photos. Seriously, this is coming from the New York Times, but take a look at this photo. This is a photo of a couple firefighters, and they're trying to fight the fires and, get the trees and stuff. They're standing what appears to be next to a home. Okay. And here, let me just keep going in this. Here's a picture of a man who is checking on his neighbors. And you can see there's smoke and there's fire in and around the branches, or sorry, in and around the houses in the bushes. Okay. Here's another of a house that's just completely burned out. It's gone. In fact, if you look, there's a caddy sitting in the freaking corner of the picture. And yeah, it's just, here's another one of a firefighter. He's holding on, he or she, I can't really tell. I think it's a he, holding on to a hose, but you can see the hose is just barely trickling out any water. Here's a video right here in this camera of a house that's completely engulfed in flames. The firefighters basically have nothing to do. They essentially can only try to hold parts of the fire, but these are homes that are just getting burnt out. Here's a couple firefighters attempting to knock back the fire. Tuesday evening, according to the caption below the picture, Tuesday evening, the fire had grown to almost 3,000 acres. Here's another photo of the cause of the fire is still under investigation, but here's another photo. I mean, this is devastating, folks. Devastating. And here, there's firefighters who are trying to battle this home blaze. And I mean, yeah, they got some water going on there, but I mean, here's an image of a resident trying to evacuate with a home further, just not even like 2 properties over burning. Here's another one of a resident himself standing there with his water hose, garden hose, attempting to block the fire. Here's a reflected image of the fire behind the photo taker looking in a window. And here's a video of everybody trying to get out through the smoke-filled streets. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever been to California, at least anybody watching this program. I know a couple people live in California, but I can tell you this. California is like street on top of street on top of street. There's really not a lot of room. And there is a shit ton of people in those same areas. Many people, by the way, reportedly had to actually even leave their cars because the fire was moving so rapidly that it overtook the people in their vehicles as they are trying to escape the fire. Yeah, thousands of residents were left without power. Here's a spiral staircase just sticking up out of nowhere because the house burnt completely. Here's what I was telling you about the airplanes. There's an airplane going out into the Pacific Ocean, it's coming back in to the Pacific from the Pacific to go and drop water on the fire. Even like all of the Hollywood Hills, there was a fire that firefighters extinguished. A brush fire that erupted on Sunset Boulevard near the Hollywood Hills. Here's billowing clouds of smoke just drifting all the way from the Pacific Palisades toward the shoreline of the Pacific Ocean. And here's an image of the hills that people are taking photos and stuff. A fast-moving inferno. This is part of the Pacific Palisades. Here's some of the destruction. This looks very familiar in terms of anybody who had images or photos of Hawaii and Lanai. I mean, this is just horrible. Winds up to 65 miles per hour were reported, with isolated gusts up to 85 miles an hour across Ventura and Los Angeles counties on Tuesday. I mean, this is devastation, folks. Total and complete devastation. I can't even imagine what these people are going through. And I mean, it's already expensive to live there. To be honest with you, it's one of the most expensive places in the entire country. And to not have insurance, to have to rebuild the land, it won't even be worth anything in terms of being able to build a house up there. It's just not going to happen. Just horrible. All right. I feel sorry for them. If you have the opportunity, definitely make sure that you pray for them. I mean, at least so far, there hasn't been any casualties other than the two that I think I mentioned. Most people were able to get out in time. Thank God. And no, I'm not using his name in vain for that. All right. So there's been back and forth. I talked to you about it last night about Jack Smith's report. Well, now the DOJ says that it will release it. I don't know how they can get around the court order keeping them from doing it, but hey, whatever. They did say that the report will be released to the public. That was as of today. Attorney Merrick Garland intends to release part 1 of the report, which deals directly with Trump in furtherance of the public interest in informing a co-equal branch and the public regarding this significant matter, officials said in a court filing in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Now, you recall that what happened is Judge Cannon said, no, you can't release the report until the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals rules on the motion that the other two folks in this case filed because of their Fifth Amendment rights potentially being violated over all this. Smith apparently has already transmitted the report to Garland. Now, keep in mind, Cannon's order did not stop that transmission. She just basically said the DOJ can't transmit it to anybody outside of the DOJ. And the 11th Circuit Court needed to review the motion by the co-defendants. So while prosecutors have dropped the charges against Trump, okay, they're still pursuing it against the other two, which is part of the reason why they were able to file this motion for it, like I told you last night. Now, the DOJ in the motion, Nauta and De Oliveira, which are the two individuals, say that Smith should be fired and that his report should not be released because of the fact that he was found by Cannon to be unconstitutionally appointed. The DOJ's lawyers said in a new filing that whether Smith was unconstitutionally appointed is irrelevant because the issue at hand is how Garland handles Smith's report. I argue that it's not irrelevant because he was appointed unconstitutionally. Therefore, anything that came after his appointment is irrelevant, meaning any of the information that he gleaned is completely irrelevant, which basically would negate the entire reason for even having a report. But we'll have to see what happens here. But anyway, so the DOJ and Merrick Garland is saying they're going to release the report, period. Okay. And, folks, seriously, all this is lawfare all over again. They failed, they're failing, they're falling, and they need something to hit back with because they got shellacked. They got shellacked. So anyway, so as far as all of this is concerned, I'm just saying this is just horrible. I'm just not, I don't know where to go with this. I mean, it really doesn't matter anyway, because the report, to be honest with you, even if what Jack Smith pulls out of the report, okay, and only puts in the report what he knows so far, the only thing that's really there is what he gave the grand jury. They haven't even finished. I mean, none of this stuff has actually been vetted at trial. None of it has been presented as evidence, either prosecution or defense evidence, because all of this stuff was, the motions and everything else, getting to the point where he was considered unconstitutionally appointed. All of that happened before any of the evidence really was able to get presented in court. So most of what he's going to put in the report anyway is going to be innuendo, propaganda, and probably outright lies. So anyway, there you go. I don't know. We'll just have to kind of see what the hell happens here. This is just another shot at Trump, which, by the way, Trump did ask SCOTUS for this in a different court case. Trump did ask SCOTUS to intervene on his behalf for the Mershon case that's coming, that he is supposed to be sentenced for in 2 days. He did ask SCOTUS to intervene and has appealed to them because, of course, the New York appeals court, when Trump asked, hey, can we delay the sentencing? The appeals court turned that down. No surprise, that's New York. So we'll have to see what SCOTUS says about this. But we'll have to see, again, we'll have to see what happens here. But I mean, until something comes out, I'm not holding out hope for that. So we'll probably see the sentencing anyway on Friday. Well, the Trump held a presser. So let's just move from Trump trials to Trump presser. Trump held a presser the other day, and I think it was yesterday, and he caused several, shall we say, liberal heads to explode. I saw all kinds of lies and innuendo and everything else all over freaking the social medias, of course, because of the fact that Trump talked about things like Greenland, okay, the Panama Canal, and January 6th pardons. Here you can see in this Epic Times piece, okay. He also was talking during his press conference that the question that came from the press audience had to deal with the fact that whether or not Hamas was going to hold on to or whether or not the Trump regime was going to go after Iran or Hamas or whoever. And Trump said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Trump said clearly that, you know what, the hostages, the U.S. hostages, the hostages themselves should have never been taken on October 7th. But because of the fact that the hostages are even still in the hands of Hamas had better let them go before I get into office, because if they don't, all hell is going to break loose in the Middle East, and nobody is going to want that. So he's pretty much basically telling Hamas, you better let our people, meaning the U.S. hostages, you better let our people go. And that didn't sit well with a lot of freaking lefties out there. They were just like, oh, what is he going to do? The same thing goes with Iran. There was a question to him about Iran, and he basically said, okay, well, first of all, I'm not going to comment on that because that is a military strategic plan. No reason for me to answer that question. And the question was in regards to whether or not the U.S. would strike Iran if Iran was putting together a nuke. I mean, I think the obvious answer is, hell yeah, but Trump being Trump, and I'll be honest with you, being a lot more reserved this time around, pretty much just said, no, I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do. So, yeah, this is just, it's amazing. Well, here's some of the things that are going on with regards to things like Greenland. And I'll be completely honest with you. I kind of agree with the idea from a strategic standpoint, from a resources standpoint. There is no reason why America should not purchase Greenland. So, you know, I didn't really think about this as much for a while until Trump brings it up. It is a very strategic location. There is a strait and a waterway going from the Arctic Sea down into the Atlantic that Greenland borders. Greenland is already being protected by the United States. And this is part of the reason why a lot of intelligent folks are saying that, yeah, Trump actually has a valid argument to make the claim that Greenland should actually be a U.S. territory, because the Danes, they're not paying attention to it. They're not defending that waterway. They're not putting money toward that to defend that waterway. They're just doing whatever they're doing with Greenland. And by the way, just so those of you who don't know the history of Greenland, Americans actually, quote, discovered Greenland. Okay. They discovered Greenland, and Americans have before, okay, before the Danes and the Norway, and those two fought over it, and the Danes ended up winning, not like physical fight, but they basically had a conversation about it, and the Danes basically were like, yeah, okay, we're going to take a hold of this. But they haven't really done a whole heck of a lot with the island since. Strategically, it makes sense for America to put something up there. We've already got stuff up there. And as 3 Chevy points out, we actually defended it in World War II because of the fact that the Nazis at the time had taken over the Danes. And yeah, so anyway, the point is that there is a lot of history that would indicate, if we were to take this to, say, a court of law, okay, there we could make the case that Greenland already is one of our territories. We have a military post up there, by the way. And I wasn't aware of that, but we do have one, and a military outpost and so on and so forth. Plus, it also has a large deposit of several minerals and resources and oil that we could conceivably take advantage of. So there is an argument that could be made for us taking on Greenland. Now, Donald Trump Jr. went up there, and the left was like, oh, they hate Donald Trump. They hate Donald Trump. But yet I saw a video of Donald Trump Jr. coming into the airport, and as he walked into the airport, well, he was welcomed with open arms. Oh, it's not here on this one. It's on the other one. But he was welcomed with open arms. So, yeah. Now, let's shift gears and go toward the Panama Canal. Well, a lot of people who don't study history don't realize that the Panama Canal started off as an American-funded project. American labor did the majority of the work down there. America paid for that to happen, and it wasn't up until, and we actually controlled it, up until Carter gave it back to Panama during his administration. Now, if Panama had kept it for themselves, okay, I think we would have been okay with what's going on there, but they haven't. There's a couple of Chinese, and it might even be the same company, but there's a couple of Chinese organizations that are essentially set up at both ends, the start and the finish, or the start and the finish, depending upon which way you're going, in terms of both ends of the Panama Canal, that are currently sort of controlling the Panama Canal. So the Panamanians have essentially handed over control to China of the Panama Canal. Now, the whole purpose of the Panama Canal when it was first built was to get our military ships from the Atlantic over to the Pacific and vice versa. That was the whole purpose of it, because they didn't want us to go and dive all the way and go around the tip of South America in order to get around. If anybody knows, you can't really do it. It's not very safe for ships to go around that horn down there. And so they built the Panama Canal with American money, American people, American ingenuity, and also to make sure for, trade of goods and things like that. America built the Panama Canal in order to increase trade and everything else. And we had protected it for years until Carter handed it back to the Panamanians. So now he's talking about retaking control of the Panama Canal. That makes strategic sense, folks. It just does. Regardless of what the left sits there and thinks about, that makes strategic sense. Now, the president also at this presser confirmed that there was a $20 billion foreign investment to construct some U.S. data centers. He's pledging at least that amount for construction across the United States. And that, of course, is to help shore up our infrastructure and potentially get a much faster and better internet across the board for some of this. He also discussed the decision of the federal judge, which I've already told you is going to be ignored by the Department of Justice. But anyway, he talked about that. He issued the warning over the Gaza hostages, which I already said. His quote actually was, "It will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out." I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is. During this same presser, he also signals major pardons for January 6th defendants, which he absolutely should, for certain. And a reporter asked him about it. He said, "You said on your first day of office you were going to pardon January 6th defendants. Are you planning to pardon those who are charged with violent offenses?" And he said, "Well, we're looking at it, and we have other people in there," adding that people didn't even walk into the building. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. People that didn't even walk into the building are in jail right now. And he goes, "We'll be looking at the whole thing, but I'll be making major pardons. Yes." So there's that. And he actually dropped, I don't think many in the mainstream media actually caught this, but he actually dropped a bomb during this presser in regards to who the FBI pipe bomb suspect actually is. He pointed this out. He says, and for those that are a little behind, the pipe bomb suspect is who planted the pipe bomb at the DNC while Kamala Harris was scheduled to be there. And he basically says that the FBI, and this is in reference to the FBI releasing new video footage of the subject, which there's some question as to whether or not the video footage has been doctored. But still, Trump responded and suggested that the FBI is aware of who planted those 2 pipe bombs. He says the FBI knows who it is. The status of the FBI has gone down. So, yeah, there you go. Anyway, now talking about this entire thing, when you're looking at him talking about Greenland, him talking about Panama Canal, him talking, and even though it's sort of sounds funny, but him talking about changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Okay. And he's got a point to that too. I mean, we're protecting the waterway. It certainly isn't Mexico that's protecting it. It's America that's protecting it. America prevents, people from getting into it. The same thing goes with Canada. I mean, people don't invade the North America, the continent, North America, because of our asses. And so he's got a point on all of this. But there is some suggestions and a hearkening back to a historic stance that the United States has done after its inception. Have you ever heard of a thing called the Monroe Doctrine? Okay. If you haven't, let me explain what the Monroe Doctrine actually is. So the Monroe Doctrine, even though it's named for Monroe, and it was President James Monroe is when it was initiated, but it's often attributed to John Quincy Adams, who came after him. Okay, it was his successor, but John Quincy Adams was actually his Secretary of State. Sorry. So the Monroe Doctrine's goal was very limited in what it was supposed to do during the development of the United States. So America, the Monroe Doctrine basically boils down to this, okay? America was not going to go and spread out amongst the world to find, they call them monsters in this Daily Signal piece that I'm referencing here. The monsters that are out there. The idea was the Monroe Doctrine was basically, look, we're going to secure our freedom here at home, and we're going to do that by securing our interests specifically. Okay. And we're only going to focus on those specific interests. All right. So, a guy by the name of Walter McDougall, who was a historian, wrote the book Promised Land Crusader State, the American Encounter with the World since 1776. And in that book, he mentions the principles of the original Monroe Doctrine were conceived narrowly in terms of vital nearby American interests. So it was best understood, according to McDougall, as a purposeful, vague proclamation of U.S. determination to defend whatever vital national interests it had or might in the future identify, but it was specifically with the Western Hemisphere. Okay? So what is being suggested here is that Trump might be returning to what is considered to be the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, which is, and if you look at it from a standpoint on that, if you look at it from that standpoint, then things like talking about Greenland and talking about, the Panama Canal and talking about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, all of these things kind of fall into that same general thought process. for his foreign policy that he is working on setting moving forward. Okay. Now, the Canada comments, I just want to reference directly. The Canada comments are Trump basically telling Canada, you need to get rid of your leftist lunatic Trudeau. And he is using the comment about Canada becoming the 51st state, not only as a part of this newly revised, potentially Monroe Doctrine 2.0, but also to do essentially what Trump is very good at, which is getting under the skin of his opponents. And he is doing this very effectively. In fact, he's so effective at it that some of the politicians up there in Canada are freaking out about it. In fact, one of them was saying something along the lines of, well, we'll take Oregon, Washington, and California. Yeah, she wasn't exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer there. But the point is that Trump seems to be bringing back a traditional way of thinking that harkens all the way back to President James Monroe and ultimately John Quincy Adams, his successor. Okay. So, yeah, this is including the Panama Canal, China's de facto control over the canal would be an enormous long distance threat, or long term, I should say, to the United States. See, China has been, and Greenland too, thinking about this, Greenland too is the fact that China has made a whole bunch of inroads up into the Arctic Circle. I haven't been pointing that out, but I've been seeing that in articles. I haven't brought it to the program yet because honestly, there were other factors and other more important subjects that I needed to cover. But China has been making a bunch of inroads into the Arctic. And so having Greenland as a part of America would be an incredible strategic importance for America in terms of getting up there into the polar north. And that essentially is kind of the scenario. Now, I also want to point out that Ronald Reagan pointed out after Carter had passed the Panama Canal off that Ronald Reagan basically said, yeah, we never should have let that go. We never should have handed it back to the Panamanians. And yeah. So again, the left is going nuts all over the place about Trump's presser and the way that Trump is speaking. And they're sitting there making a mockery or attempting to make a mockery of President Trump and his plans moving forward. But when you start breaking it down and realizing what it is that Trump is talking about here, folks, Trump's got some really, really intelligent and well thought out ideas as to what America should be doing moving forward into the next evolution of America. Okay. You guys, the left sits there and makes a mockery and thinks that he's off his rocker. He's not off his rocker. He's not even close to being off his rocker, folks. He's been told way too many times, as he said in the presser, that Greenland is a strategic importance for us. But again, like I pointed out, Greenland is abundant in natural resources, but it's also a prime location for defending the U.S. against potential threats from Russia, China, or any other power that comes down from the Arctic Circle. Yeah. So this is not This is not the ravings of a lunatic. This is not the ravings of a senile old man like we have with Biden. This is a start, but he's not even in office yet. But this is a start of an intelligent conversation of where are we going in the near future. Now, Trump, being Trump, is a bit of a troll. And so he knows that throwing some of these things out here, okay, throwing some of these things out here, he knows is going to make the left go nuts. It's going to make them go crazy. And sometimes I think he does it on purpose, just to make them go crazy and to make them go nuts. But he's also highly intelligent with all of this. And he is, I think, a lot more put together for sure than Biden, as far as that goes. All right, 3 Chevy points out, Rick, the same ones who say Trump is off his rocker told us that Biden is cogent or coherent, either way. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Let's move on. We have another article here that points out, and these are more court filings. I mean, how much more information do we need to provide that shows that the government itself has been lying about the censorship that they have been particularly participating in with non-governmental organizations? I mean, Zuckerberg, the owner of Meta, just pointed out about how the fact checkers, who were supposed to be independent, third-party, nonpartisan folks, okay, went ahead and has now gotten rid of those third-party fact checkers and is turning it over into a more of a community notes style, like what is on Elon Musk's X. That he essentially, in his recorded statement about what he was doing with this, he essentially didn't come out and say it, but also did come out and say it, that the fact checkers were actually censoring. We're actually censoring conservative speech. And many people, in terms of their speeches and what they were saying. Sorry, got distracted. Second. But now there's some court filings that have come out, in particular, that are now demonstrating that the communications monopolies' attempts to mute Americans' critiques of government go all the way back to the Barack Obama presidency, and yet still continues today, according to these court documents that were filed on December 23rd. So here you can see this is in the Federalist, and federal documents that were uncovered by a separate litigation on December 19th concur and show censorship of public discussion about prudent COVID policies that began at least by February 18th of 2020, a month before the unprecedented citizen lockdowns. Now, that information specifically contradicts the Department of Homeland Security's claims that its censorship efforts began months later. These same documents also highlight that government employees deliberately violated transparency laws, such as Freedom of Information Act's request to hide their use of public offices. The December 23rd filing from the Missouri v. Biden plaintiffs, cites that a May New York Times article showing some defendants, particularly the NIH and the NIAID, have intentionally misspelled words in order to avoid production pursuant to FOIA requests, deleted emails, and user private emails. Given this, the plaintiffs have asked the federal district court to expand discovery to include intentionally misspelled keywords. The filing also states that Biden's senior advisor Andy Slavitt, a former Obama official, continued using his White House email address even after he left government employment, presumably in an attempt to wield the authority of an office that he no longer held. Slavitt personally, quote, bullied Twitter into deplatforming journalist Alex Berenson over his skepticism of the mRNA injections, according to the filing. The Missouri plaintiffs are petitioning for greater discovery and depositions in a case that the U.S. Supreme Court returned to the district level after declining a preliminary injunction against vast censorship efforts that use taxpayer-funded cutout organizations to mask federal demands. The plaintiffs argued that this case is exceptional. Never before in this country's history has a government censorship regime coordinated at the highest levels been exposed through litigation. Now, remember, I told you about this court case. You know, a lot of people have dismissed it because it already showed up at SCOTUS. Well, SCOTUS basically just said, no, we're not going to stop the government for doing what it's doing. Okay. We're not going to stop them while this case is going on, but the case needs to go back to the lower court and conclude. So, again, what's happening here is the plaintiffs, including the state of Missouri and Louisiana, the Health Freedom Louisiana co-director Jill Hines, and Gateway Pundit founder Jim Hoft, and internationally recognized research scientists, medical doctors, Martin Koldorf, Aaron Kiralty, and Jay Bhattacharya, a Stanford University medical professor who is now President Trump's nominee to lead the National Institutes of Health. These individual plaintiffs are represented by a group, Burns Law Firm, and the New Civil Liberties Alliance. And so they basically are demonstrating over and over and over again that there is a decades-long record of hiding and even tampering with evidence that the DOJ itself, is doing. Now, again, keep in mind, this particular case, I'm telling you, once this case concludes, it's going to show, I believe, a systemic problem or a systemic pattern of government pushing non-governmental organizations to do their bidding, to do what they constitutionally can't, which is essentially censor speech, especially of conservatives, but censor speech that is against the government and the government's stance. Okay? That's what essentially what they're looking to do. Now, during the initial discovery, the plaintiffs noted on December 23rd that Twitter claimed it had communicated with just 11 federal officials about online censorship efforts. Yet after Elon Musk bought Twitter months later, the company then revised that same number to upwards of 84 federal officials. Okay? So the American First Legal Foundation litigated against the State Department and a DHS sub-agency called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, which uncovered documents released on December 19th Those documents show government employees pumped public communications channels with false information while claiming to do the exact opposite. Those documents show federal agencies pressuring communications monopolies to hide arguments with substantial backing, such as that, here we go, fabric masks do not stop viruses and COVID-19 bears the marks of human engineering. Do you remember how I was talking about, and I've actually had this happen to me myself where I got YouTube kicked me off or took down one of my videos where I was talking about, and they're probably going to take this one down too, but where I was talking about the fact that masks don't work in terms of the cloth masks and even the surgical masks to try and stop a virus, which is smaller than the spaces in between the woven cloth of the mask. Okay. Now, here in the piece, the Federalist even claims that their traffic was throttled for publishing accurate discussions of mask research and for objecting immediately to the nationwide lockdowns. Folks, just going to point this out. And I know I'm getting a little excited while reading this, but there is a reason for this. Government is not your friend. Government is the necessity of evil that has to be in place for certain things to get accomplished. Okay? But as our founders discussed it, it is a necessary evil. But it cannot be allowed wide open and widespread, just whatever the hell it wants to do. And unfortunately, over the course of decades, we have finally worked our way to a point where now the federal government is being worshipped by the left as being the end-all be-all, number one. Number two, the Constitution, while written for anyone to be able to read and understand, should they have just a modicum of reading comprehension skills, okay, that it clearly states that the federal government needs to be small and limited in nature. And yet we as a people, due to generations of not paying attention, have allowed government to grow well past its constitutional boundaries. And it's because of this that you need to take federal government with a grain of salt. Think of it as the federal government being the enemy that you need to watch and pay attention to, no matter what, that you cannot turn your back on that individual because they will stab you in the back every single time. That is exactly what government is. And unfortunately, society, American society, has become complacent in not only understanding, but also in the application of the Constitution. I myself have gotten into several discussions on what is now called the town square of social media, and have shown and demonstrated to many people, this is what the Constitution says. This is what is meant. And these people refuse to see the truth. Government is not your friend. Government is a necessary evil that needs to exist for certain things. But outside of that, you should look at it as though it is that backstabbing person that you do not trust, period. Now, the documents that were submitted, okay, further information out of this piece, The documents that were submitted reveal that the DHS personally targeted Bhattacharya for censorship because he conducted an early study that contradicted the government's claims about the COVID fatality rate. Curieti notes that Bhattacharya's data was later replicated dozens of times. The direct targeting validates Bhattacharya's standing in the pursuit of the lawsuit, his lawyers say, which was a question that the Supreme Court failed to resolve. Federal documents also claim concerns about internet censorship in the United States emanating from the Russian disinformation ecosystem and undermine the very notion of objective truth. Narratives that they label foreign propaganda include observing that the COVID-19 panic could financially benefit Big Pharma. This case is huge. This case is absolutely huge. Okay. And nobody is paying attention and talking to it or talking about it. The investigations have been revealing how government officials edited media monopolies, content moderation policies to enable censorship. This is why, the Missouri plaintiffs argue, it would be valuable to know how Twitter came to adopt the policy that tweets contradicting CDC policies would be censored. Who would make such a determination? And whether or not such operations were halted during Dr. Walensky's tenure. If they were not, there are reasonable grounds to suppose that the CDC's activities had or have not ceased. This thing is huge. This thing is huge. And if you think that the government is going to just, stop doing what it's doing and it being benevolent and the almighty benevolent rulers of our planet, no, they're not. Unless we go and check them hard, they will continue. They will continue to violate the Constitution. And this is part of the reason why Democrats in particular, but all politicians altogether, Democrats in particular, need to be watched like a freaking hawk. Cannot let these people an inch, an iota of any type of movement forward. We can't do this. Hopefully this case will come to a equitable and righteous conclusion. Well, as nobody should be surprised about this, Joe Biden has now confirmed that he is considering preemptive pardons. Why does anybody really? Anyway. The president has apparently been reported to be considering issuing pardons to people who have not been charged with a crime. Now, remember, this is legal. Okay, you don't have to be charged with a crime. You just have to have committed the crime. Okay. Anyway, President Joe Biden was talking in an interview on January 5th, which would be 3 days ago, and he has confirmed that he is considering whether or not to issue preemptive pardons. One of them, of course, is for people like Liz Cheney and Anthony Fauci. Yeah. So those individuals, of course, have drawn criticism from President-elect Donald Trump. Okay. Biden talked about a meeting that they apparently discussed this, and Biden said, I tried to make it clear that there was no need and that it was counterintuitive for his interest to go back and try to settle scores. Apparently, according to Biden, Trump didn't respond directly to that advice. So, yeah. Now, Biden is suggesting that his going and pardoning. Now, okay, Buddy, you're correct. You can't be pardoned for something that didn't happen. But basically you can be pardoned for something that happened, but that you haven't been charged with yet. And by the way, too, scholars, legal scholars, real legal scholars, not the people like, Lawrence Tribe and those bullshit artists, but real legal scholars have basically said that a pardon cannot pardon somebody for a future crime either, which is entirely true. But anyway, so Biden did make a suggestion, all right, that that his decision on whether or not to give out preemptive pardons depends on Trump's cabinet picks. I don't know why he would do that, because Trump's already announced all of them. But anyway, the Trump transition team did not respond to a request for comment from the Epoch Times, which is where this piece comes from. Inquiries that were sent to the employers of Cheney and Fauci were also not returned. So they also floated the idea as a possible preemptive pardon as Hillary Clinton, who is the former Secretary of State. She mishandled confidential emails, campaign-funded opposition research against Trump, so on and so forth. And by the way, Hillary Clinton is on a list that Kash Patel has actually been holding on for this. So, yeah. Our participants, he's calling them participants in the so-called deep state. So, anyway. Now, toward that end, former President Bill Clinton has said that he does not think that Biden should preemptively pardon his wife. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Don't forget, we have like 12 days. And so, yeah. Yep. Anyway. Speaking of those Trump team picks, nominations, I should say. One of them outside of Matt Gaetz that has drawn the ire of a lot of people is Pete Hegseth. Well, one of the claims is that Pete Hegseth raped a woman, and apparently this individual who is leveling the charges or the allegations against Pete Hegseth, according to the Washington Free Beacon, is a former employee who is disgruntled. A former Concerned Veterans for America, that's the company that Hegseth used to was the CEO of, I believe. And apparently there is an employee with them who is privately helping Senate Democrats solicit hostile testimony about her former boss, Pete Hegseth. The former employee, Kat Dugan, worked at CVA for 8 months while Hegseth served as the CEO of the organization, and has sent messages to former CVA colleagues urging them to contact the Senate Armed Services Committee and assuring them that they can do so anonymously. She has also provided closed-door testimony to the committee, according to correspondence obtained by the Washington Free Beacon. Dugan, formerly Kathleen Volant, received a poor performance review in 2014 when she was serving as CVA's North Carolina State Director. Shortly thereafter, she filed for short-term disability, long-term disability, and ultimately tendered her resignation in December of 2014. Sean Pattinson, who served as CVA's national field director at the time, told the Free Beacon that Dugan consistently fell short of performance expectations. And a copy of her performance review that was reviewed by the Free Beacon substantiates that assessment. So the text messages and documents shed new light on the high-profile opposition campaign against Hegseth, which has played out in the press and comes largely from anonymous sources. The news could also bolster claims from Hegseth and his allies, who have blamed the negative publicity on disgruntled employees, waging a manufactured media takedown. In fact, apparently this is not the first time that Dugan has been linked to unflattering media reports about Hegseth. In March 2018, when Hegseth was floated as a possible nominee to lead the Department of Veterans Affairs, his lawyer sent Dugan a cease and desist letter accusing her of making false and defamatory statements about Hegseth to J. Arthur Bloom, a writer who has contributed to The Spectator, that was, quote, intended to damage Mr. Hegseth's reputation and his potential future employment prospects. So, yeah. The same day that letter was sent, The Spectator published an article reporting that while at CVA, Hegseth promoted a fraternity-like culture that involved heavy drinking and turned a blind eye to a sexual assault complaint against another employee. The story, which cited, of course, unnamed sources, was published under the magazine's pseudonym byline, Cockburn. The headline asked, "Is Pete Hegseth really a suitable candidate for Secretary of Veterans Affairs?" Yeah. Bloom decided to comment, or declined to comment on whether he wrote the article, which made reference to a sexual assault complaint filed by a female CVA employee. He did, however, share a copy of the letter that Dugan wrote to an attorney 2 months after departing CVA regarding that sexual assault complaint, which did not pertain to Hegseth, by the way, in which Dugan described a sexist and drinking culture that set the stage for this kind of incident. In other words, there is a possibility, a large possibility, that all of this crap that's being leveraged at Pete Hegseth is just that, a disgruntled employee making false claims and allegations. We'll see. There's more to it in this piece. You can check out my my description in the videos and find links to all of the pieces that I have discussed so far today. Okay. I got one more, and then I've got a pet of the week for you. So remember how I was telling you about the congestion toll that Kathy Hochul had put in and put up on with regards to New York City? The idea, of course, was to go after businesses that use petroleum-based products and things like that. Well, apparently New York City drivers, oh, those people are smart. But apparently New York City drivers have devised a bunch of clever ways to conceal license plate numbers that prevent the automated toll booth cameras from seeing the license plate, and therefore are avoiding the congestion toll. Here in the New York Post. Whoops, sorry. Take a look at this. Here in the New York Post, there was even a James Bond style plate flipper that was there. So the New York Post went out and started taking a look and spotted a bunch of sneaky do-it-yourself tactics in action, they claim, often deployed on newer or high-end vehicles, reminiscent of what the ongoing, I guess there's a problem that they have with, quote, ghost plates that supposedly cost the city hundreds of millions of dollars each year. So they're not sure whether or not the observed trickery is a direct result of the new $9 toll being imposed when entering Midtown Manhattan, but many of the plates, okay, that were altered were sighted near the perimeters of what's called the congestion zone on Sunday when the fee went into effect. So let's see. Here's an example of one of them. You can see somebody scratched across the entire plate and also scratched out the lower parts of the 5, the 1, and the 2 in the plate with the hopes of making it misread, making the toll readers misread the plate. You also found that somebody went and glued, for an example, a washer on top of a number 6 to make it look like a number 8. They've also found, the Post also found LED flashers positioned directly on either side of the plate that would essentially temporarily blind the license plate reading camera as it attempts to read the digits in to charge for the toll. So here is an example of where the congestion zone is and the tolls that are accounted for. And here, let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger for you. There we go. Here's some of the tolls that are accounted for as you go in. For an example, if you're crossing in the Lincoln Tunnel, the tolls for an Easy Pass, which is basically an electronic pass that you can purchase on a monthly basis, is $21.38. Whereas if you're doing it by the plate, it's $26.63. If you go to, for an example, the Manhattan Bridge has a $9 toll with an Easy Pass versus $13.50 by the plate. So many businesses, by the way, like funeral homes, for an example, have begun shifting costs to the customers. Rideshare apps like Lyft raised its city bike prices for New Yorkers, hoping to avoid taking a car. The FDNY union and the EMT union claim that congestion pricing will slow down their response times as well. Many New Yorkers have been skeptical about the congestion pricing's effects, especially after multiple publicized crimes on the subway in recent weeks. Drivers are expected to dump their car above the zone or outside of the zone, making parking much more difficult uptown versus downtown, where this is taking place. Here's another one, another clever idea. Somebody took essentially clear glue and painted it on the license plate around the numbers in the hopes that when the light or the infrared light came on with the camera, that it would deflect and diffract the light, making the plate unreadable. So, yeah. Oh, another tool of the trade, by the way, is to attach a bogus dealer plate to the back of the car, which are easily removable when needed and can be acquired from an unscrupulous auto dealer or even printed out at home. Here's another one where the person took the plate and bent it in such a way that hopefully it would avoid being able to be read by the toll booth cameras, the automated toll booth cameras. So those New Yorkers are not happy about this whole congestion zone thing, and they are letting people know about it. All right, let's go ahead and get on to what everybody knows and loves, and that is tonight's pet of the week. All right, so tonight's pet of the week is submitted by Coco de Whiskey, or Coco de Minky, as a lot of us know her. And let's go ahead, and I forgot to shut this off, so let's get rid of that. So here I'd like to introduce you to a wonderful little kitty And here's the story. Hi, Whiskey. Sorry in advance for how long this got. Okay, I'm going to try and read through it as quickly as possible. But anyway, I remember not too long ago telling the chat about my 20-some pound cat that I used to have. Well, I finally found some pictures of him. His name was Zippy, and he's a tailless Siamese Manx. She says, yes, I did say tailless. Just a little history. Manx cats are known for being born without tails. Zippy was considered a rumpy, which you can see here in this photo. There is no tail on this cat. Okay. What you see there is the back leg in dark colors. There is no tail. Now, apparently, because he had no tail, a rumpy, some Manxes are actually born with just a stump. They're called stumpies, or regular tails, which are called longies. Okay. Thus named after this breed, Manx syndrome is a genetic mutation that occurred in a small population of British Shorthair cats on the Isle of Man. It is a dominant mutation, meaning that men and kittens will also be tailless with breeding. It is considered unethical to breed them, though, because tailless cats have a lot of medical problems and spinal issues. Worst case is that a cat may only live 3 to 4 years. So Zippy was one of the lucky ones and did not have these types of medical issues. He was, however, obese, which is another trait of the main cat. Let me back this off so that you guys can see him again. So anyway, she says that she adopted Zippy from a coworker when he was 9 years old. They were going on a mission overseas and couldn't take him along. At the time, he was 24 to 25 pounds. Holy crap, that's a big freaking cat. Anyway, my coworker told me that Zippy loved having tuna for dinner every single night. He was huge and definitely not very zippy, she comments. She chose not to feed Zippy tuna every night for dinner and put him on a special IAMS diet for obese cats. She had Zippy for 4 wonderful years. Unfortunately, one day while she was on vacation, her husband's son was house sitting. He let Zippy out before he went out with some friends because Zippy liked lying in the grass. And due to other unforeseen circumstances, my stepson was unable to get back to the house that night, and Zippy couldn't get back inside. So, being the portly cat that he he wandered off to find food and went ahead and got lost. The day after Coco got back home from her trip, the vet called to say that someone, unfortunately, had hit Zippy with their car and promptly brought him to the vet. She was unable to get there in time to say goodbye, and Zippy passed away from his injuries. At the time of his passing in 2009, he was 13 years old, and he was actually down to 17 pounds. So here's another picture of Zippy. Zippy was a great cat, she says, very calm, cuddly, and affectionate, and very social. He didn't seem to be afraid of any other animals or humans in the house from the start. He has been missed a lot. She says, I have 3 pictures of Zippy that I was able to find. One is from behind, but due to his coloring, it's hard to tell that he has no tail. But I assure you, he does not. And then she says, until we meet at the Rainbow Bridge, zip, zip. Closes this out for thanks for all you do, Whiskey. Blessings, Coco. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, Coco, but that is a very beautiful cat. And I thank you for sharing him with us here on the American Perspective channel and broadcast. All right, folks. That's it for me for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free. And once you are there, make sure that you sign up, sign in, and find the American Perspective channel. Hit that green follow button to make sure that you get notified every time I go live. Also, too, I do have one other pet of the week, just as a side note. I do have one other pet of the week for the next time that we do pet of the week. But that doesn't mean that I don't want your submissions. Submit now. Submit now. Submit now by sending them to fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online. Don't forget on your way out to hit those thumbs up buttons, those like buttons, etc., all across my outlets, whether it is Facebook, YouTube, X, and of course the aforementioned Twitter. We will see you tomorrow night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.